Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris. I am the guest speaker, apparently, and I just dropped my water. Starting off good. So, a little bit about me. I am not the normal guy who is up here. I am the, backup. And so that's why I'm here today. So, we're all honored. Number two, I am, my fear number one is what is happening right now. This moment is it. So, we all get to experience that together. And then number three, I have a really bad cold, so I'm going to do my best to keep, putting these cough drops in my mouth and cough away from the microphone. So today, we are really glad you're here today. It is an odd Sunday. It is our, like Brian said, most of our campus ministry, our youth ministry, and a lot of our leaders are out of town, and so that's why we're having one service. And so last week, though, Robert kicked off the sermon series that is related to our theme for this year, which is Together. And the sermon series is about how they got it together. And so today we're going to be talking about how to have victory when it seems like the odds are against you. And I wanted to start off, I was telling somebody this morning, I want to start off with a story because, I like telling stories and they're fun and they kind of diffuse the tension of the situation of what's going on. And so the story I wanted to tell was I was trying to think of a time when I was when the odds were so against me, and it was a good story. And so one of the things that I came up with was I was 18 years old. I just graduated high school. I played football all throughout high school, and the campus ministry would always play football together. I saw Travis this morning. I almost talked to him about this. But so I was my height, 5'9", but I was about half of what I weigh now, and I was just a tiny little guy. And so what happens during these football games is that people start getting kind of intense. It's hot outside, adrenaline is rushing, and it just starts getting pretty intense. Well, so they always put me, I'm skinny, so they put me in the back to, go chase down people, catching footballs. And so one of the things, what happened was I was, chasing somebody. I turn around, and because I hear people screaming, they gave a handoff, right? And to a fella on their team, who some in here might know, but I won't say his name. He's kind of 17 foot tall, probably weighed about 300 pounds at the time, was kind of the human equivalent of Shrek. And he's running full speed, and he is just pushing dudes off him like it's nothing as he's running. And it's, yeah, so in my mind, I'm like, I got this. If I don't stand up to this guy, I'm going to get all this guff. So I'm going to do whatever I can. So I start charging him, okay? And I'm running full speed at him. And it hits me somewhere 10 yards away. This guy's 6 times my size. The odds are not in my favor here. But, I was very determined that I was going to prove everybody wrong, prove myself wrong. And can I tell you what happened? He hit me so hard, I don't remember what happened. All I know is that I looked up and I saw him still running and I was on the ground. The only benefit out of the story, there was a little victory, was that afterwards, I'm pretty sure I had a concussion, and this pretty girl started taking care of me at Carrie Cox's house, and then I married her later. So, there was some benefit in that story. There you go. So, but we all have those times, right? When we're in a fight, when we're in a battle in life, and we can feel like the odds are against us. And sometimes there are battles and fights in our life that if we go at it alone, we're destined to lose that battle. And so that's kind of the theme for this year, is being together. That's the idea of this sermon, is how do we get that victory together? And so to frame it, what we came up with was to talk about the story of Jericho, okay, in the Old Testament. You've got the Israelites who are, just crossing the Jordan, which was a really big deal. It's a whole cool story. And the first city that they're supposed to go take is Jericho. If I'm a boxer and my first match is against that giant Shrek guy, I would think I should start with someone little, me. Start with someone my size. I want to fight someone that I can have a quick victory with. But God arranged it so that the first fight that they were going to have was against Jericho. Jericho is one of the oldest cities in recorded history. It's one of the first cities that had wall fortifications. And the walls were so big that people lived in these walls. They were so big that you could, drive a car on these walls if you wanted to. They didn't have cars back then, but you get the point. They were big walls. They also dug a big ditch around the entire city. And so it's kind of like if you had a 2-story house and you walk to the back, it's got a dugout, basement, a walkout basement. It looks like a 3-story house. That's kind of what happened there, right? So if you were just a person and you would walk up to these walls, they're insurmountable. There's no way that you could just go straight on attack Jericho with what the Israelites had. When they were coming up to this battle, it looked like it was hopeless. Their abilities versus what they were, opposed with, there was just no way they were going to win this fight. And so, if you know the story, we obviously know that they won the battle. So that's what we're going to be talking about. How do you win the victory? How do you get against all odds? How do you get that victory? So the first thing is that we get that victory when I get together with God. When I get together with God. The bulk of the bulk of the story of Jericho is in Joshua chapter 6. That's when the whole story actually takes place. But to set this up, the Bible actually talks about some instances or an interaction between Joshua and God in chapter 5. And so that's what's on your notes here. We wanted to kind of talk about what does it look like to actually get together with God? What does that mean? What does that look like? Joshua chapter 5, 13 through 15. It says, "Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and he saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, 'Are you for us or for our enemies?' 'Neither,' he replied, 'but as the commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come.' Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, 'What message does my Lord have for his servant?' The commander of the Lord's army is holy." I'm sorry, I skipped a line there. The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. And so there's a few things that we can learn about what togetherness with God actually looks like here. The first thing, and you got blanks on your notes. I'm sorry, Robert always says the exact same thing in your worship bulletin. You'll notice that there is a piece of paper that makes maybe following along with me a little easier. So on your notes, there's a blank there. That first blank is I see God for who he really is. I see God for who he really is. And I think this is vastly important, right? In verse 13, it says, "When Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up, he saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. As the commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." A lot of times, we like to imagine God as this force that just gives us things, or something that we can go who will bail us out of stuff. Or we look at God as though he's just this, just a fountain of blessings just for us. And what theologians will say is that this is actually an appearance of Christ in the Old Testament, that this man that's here, this is called a Christophany, that this is actually, in some way, shape, or form, Jesus who is here talking to Joshua. And so when we think about Jesus too, we often kind of frame Jesus like he's just this meek, just weak, just here, everything's good. And we get this idea of Jesus as just being someone who's just super nice, and he would never say anything harsh, and he would never do anything harsh. But the way that he describes himself in this is the commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And that idea, he's even saying, look, I'm neither for you nor against you, I'm for God. That's what I'm here for. And you need to get it. We need to be able to frame that God is not just this person who we just get to follow around and ask for blessing. He's not just, he is the one who created the beauty of sunsets and the complexity of gravity. He is bigger and mightier and stronger. Everything that we can even dream of and comprehend, he invented it with just words, right? It's important that we go to God, when we go to God in prayer, when we go to God, when we have a relationship with God, that we know who that God is. He's not meek. He's not weak. He's not any of those things. He's strong and mighty, bigger than we can comprehend. I wrote down, he's not our buddy, right? He's not just like, hey, I get to hang out with God tonight. Like, God's calling the shots. We need to see his greatness and his superiority. The second thing is, because we see his greatness and superiority, I choose to revere him at all times. I choose to revere him at all times. To revere is to greatly admire somebody, to have a deep sense of respect for somebody. We understand reverence to God is an understanding that we get that God is this and that we are down here. I've heard worship described as something where we are lifting God up, but it's impossible for us to lift God up. He is strong and mighty. We are just us, right? What we are actually doing is realizing that we are low and that he is high, that we are weak and that he is strong, that everything that we are not, he is, and that is what God is. Reverence for him then, in Joshua's case, is that he fell face down to the ground in reverence. It can be easy to worship God whenever we're together. It can be easy to clap your hands and nod when the music sounds good. It can be easy to give an appearance of reverence to God. This story happened when no one was there. This story happened between him and God. It's important for us to understand what togetherness with God looks like. It's not just understanding who God is, but it's also holding him up with reverence to say, no one's around. God, it's me and you. I am nothing, and you are everything. And that's genuine reverence. There's also a story in Luke chapter 14, whenever Jesus kind of tells the same kind of story, where he says, look, there's a battle going to happen. There's an army with 20,000 men. There's an army with 10,000 men. Well, don't you think that the king with 10,000 men would say, hey, I'm Chris Mullen, and that's the giant Shrek guy. I'm not winning this fight. There's no way I'm going to win this fight. Wouldn't he ask for terms of peace? And in that day, terms of peace didn't mean like, oh, we're cool, everything's cool, like, you're good. Terms of peace meant now you're my slave. What Jesus is telling in this story is to have a relationship with God, to have that togetherness with God. It requires our submission. It requires us to say, you know what? What I want, it doesn't matter. What God wants is the only thing that matters. Which leads us to the third thing, is I act in faithful obedience. That when we're in submission to God, because we understand who he is, and because of that, we lift him up, and because of that, we act in faithful obedience. In that same Joshua passage, it says, Joshua then fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, what message does my Lord have for his servant? The commander of the Lord's army replied, take off your sandals, for this place you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. Joshua starts with that obedient language. It's underlined in the notes. It says, my Lord have for his servant. That's language that would signify that he's saying, look, I get it. You're up here, I'm down here. But then he followed that up with obedient actions, and Joshua did so. And if you go into the next chapter, which we'll be talking about, you see that this was a little thing, right? Like, it's not that hard to take off your sandals if, the commander of the Lord's army is standing right in front of you telling you, take your sandals off, right? That's just pretty easy to follow. But it didn't matter whether it was a small thing or a big thing. Joshua was obedient because he understood who God was, and he understood that togetherness with God was essential. So it didn't matter if it was taking off his sandals or taking his men into battle. That obedience is what he was going to do. The note on the notes says, together with God, victory always requires me to trust and obey. And one of the things that we understand about God is that he loves us so tremendously, that his love for us is like I said, that we can't understand how big he is. We can't understand how strong he is. We can't really fully comprehend how much he loves us. What we know is that same Christ who delivered this message in the form of a man actually did come down as a man and exhibit what that love was like for us. He exhibited a life that was, here's here's how to love, here's how to live, here's things that can help your life. And then he didn't just leave it with that. He left us with a way to be able to take care of our problem of sin so that we could actually have a relationship with this God who couldn't be in the presence of, us, right? Because we're sinful and we're bad. He made a way for us to be able to have a relationship with God through the cross. And one of the things that we have to get right before we even try to figure out how to win these battles, we have to get our relationship with God right. We have to get ourselves together with God. And one of the things that we do every week is a pattern in the first century church that is a remembrance of what that relationship with God looks like, the love that we have for God and why we should love him. Because we know that Jesus came and that he died on this plane of existence so that we could have a relationship with God. And so we're going to do that this morning. We're going to take the Lord's Supper. And so what we need to remember is that as we get going with this sermon, that together with God is the starting point. And that God started before we even did. He knew the battles we were going to come up against in this life before we even really understood it. And he loved us so much before we even decided to come to him that he made a way for us. So I'm going to pray, and then we'll pass the baskets. Father, I just want to come before you, Lord, and just, God, God, when we talk about reverence and we talk about the things that, God, you do and who you are and how big and how mighty you are and the love that you have for us, God, it's a humbling and also, quite frankly, a scary and just, a awe-inducing thing, God, to know that you care so deeply for us that you would send your son to die on a cross so that we could have a way to have a relationship with you so that we can get stuff together in our lives so that we can have a life that we can bring glory to you. And God, I just thank you so much for Jesus. God, as we take this, the bread representing the torn flesh, God, the juice representing the blood that was shed for us. God, I just pray that each and every one of us can start this morning with remembering your son and what he's done for us. I pray this in your son's name. Amen.
Be a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, O Lord. Take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of my salvation, and renew a right spirit within me. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, O Lord. Take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of my salvation, and renew a right spirit within me. Create in me a clean heart, O God.
Don't worry, I didn't run away. Okay, just want to make sure everybody was served. Okay, so all right. So it starts, if we want to have that victory, it starts with a togetherness with God. The second thing we want to talk about is that I get together with my spiritual leaders. That's the second point. I get together with my spiritual leaders. The point of this one, right, I mean, is when you see the story of Jericho, there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's like a hierarchy of leadership. But when you look at who the people are actually following, they're following Joshua, right? There's a passage in the notes from way back in Joshua chapter 1, verse 16 and 18. And this is a message that the people gave to Joshua after he became the leader after Moses. It says, "Then they answered Joshua, 'Whatever you have commanded us, we will do. Wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we fully obeyed Moses, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your word does not obey it, whatever you may command them, or does not obey whatever you command them, will be put to death. Only be strong and courageous.'" As the people were like really behind Joshua as a spiritual leader and as a physical leader in a sense there too. But I think there's a few things that we can gather from this. The first thing I think that's on your bulletins is I trust and obey my leaders. I trust and obey my leaders. Which I'm just going to be honest, is a weird thing for me to say from the stage, talking about this. But I think there's a very acutely biblical premise to this, to trust and obey your leaders. Whenever in that passage, the people say, "As we obeyed Moses, so we're going to obey you." It's kind of crazy, right? Joshua's plan, if you were a person in Israel who was to go fight this battle, or maybe you're a spouse of someone who was to go fight this battle, and you hear what Joshua's plan is, and he says, "Guys, it's cool. God told me this is what we're supposed to do." They're probably prepped, ready for like, hey, we're going to build those things from Lord of the Rings that are like the big, like walkie things that we'll climb up, and we'll wage a battle like this, or we're going to do whatever people might have done to win battles back then. Joshua instead's like, here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to go march around the city. Don't say anything. Just quiet. We're just going to march around the city. We're going to do that today, and then we're going to do that tomorrow, and then we're going to do that for, really 6 days full. And people are like, okay, and then what we're going to do on the seventh day. And they're like, yeah, all right, let's get to it. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to march around the city 7 times. And they're like, okay. And he's like, and then we're going to blow some trumpets. And don't worry, God will take care of the rest. That is insane, right? You would think a crazy person is leading them, right? And oftentimes, God's instructions can seem crazy to us. But that is what the Lord had instructed Joshua to do. And sometimes, guys, our leaders have things to say to us about our marriages or about the way that we lead our children, or the way that we are handling sin, or whatever it might be, that just sounds crazy. Why would I ever just, humbly give up in a fight with my wife? She's wrong, right? I'm not wrong. She's wrong. Why would I ever give up? Or whatever that situation might be. There's a lot of times our leaders come to us and they say hard things. And the sentiment that we had in the past of, I will do what you say because you are giving me scripture, now becomes, well, you're an idiot and I'm not following any of that because that sounds like nonsense, right? That's what happens a lot of times. So that's where that trust and obey comes from. It's not even obeying. When Paul said, follow me, imitate me, it's not just Paul's opinions. He's saying imitate me as I imitate Christ. Right? And so the things that your leader, now if your leader's saying things that are unbiblical, then we have a talk about that sort of thing, right? But most of the time, it can seem crazy. The next thing that they did is they protected their leader. It says, whoever rebels against you will be put to death. That's what they're saying. If somebody doesn't listen to you, we're going to kill him, right? I'm not telling you guys to do that at the Crossings Church, okay? I just want to be really clear about that. That's not the message here. The message here, I think that what we can learn from this, right? Because, Paul said that everything that it's written in the Old Testament was for our learning. What we can learn from this is that these people had an intensity to which they were going to say, we're not going to criticize this guy. We're going to do what he says. And anybody who's not in line, well, they need to get in line, right? That's the point. That's the message of what they're saying. And a lot of times, guys, we criticize our spiritual leaders because they're not perfect, because they didn't say something the way they should have, because they didn't do something that they were supposed to do. They didn't, whatever, give the message the way that you wanted it. And I've been there, guys. I've been there. I understand what that is. But a lot of times what we do is we don't protect our leaders. Instead, we're firing those arrows right at them, okay? We're making their job harder. But these people, they were like, no, we're in. We're going to do this. And it's a solid reminder here, guys, that your leaders, they're imperfect people. Like, I'm a cell leader. I'm so imperfect, guys. I don't handle everything right. I screw up stuff all the time. I'm a mess of a human being. We all are just broken people trying to get through this life together. And that's what we have to remember when it comes to our leaders. They're not going to be perfect. They're full of insecurities and sin and every other battle that everybody else faces. Now, hopefully that they've gotten their lives together in the way that we're talking about here for the sermon series, and they're people worth following. And that's what we try to do here at the Crossings. And then the third one is I encourage my leaders. When you look at everything that these people are saying, they're not just saying this isn't just fluff. They're saying, look, only be strong and courageous. What do we want you to do? We're going to follow you, but do the right thing. And we're here for you. We're here. We've got your back. We understand what you're saying. We're going to follow. Just be courageous and lead. These people were behind their leaders. God's going to put leaders in your life. That's how he works. God's plan A to help us overcome sin, overcome battles, is he's going to put leaders in your life. We all individually get the choice of whether or not we're going to actually submit to those leaders. We're going to listen to what those leaders say, and we're going to encourage those leaders, and we're going to protect them. Because, guys, I can tell you that there are times when I'm trying to lead where it's like, man, I'm like Jerry Maguire just screaming, help me, help you. All I'm trying to do is say, here's some advice that's going to help you. And the resistance that gets met is discouraging. It makes me want to say, man. And what would have happened if these people would have listened to Joshua's command and they were like, yeah, we're not doing that. Like, they would have never taken the victory the way that they really did in the story. And we'll get to that in a minute. The third thing is I get together with the people that God put in my life. I get together with the people that God put in my life. What does it mean to get together with those people? The first thing is I fulfill my role. I fulfill my role. I say this thing that my wife makes fun of me all the time. I say it at work. I say it in cell. I say it all the time. Like, everybody's a unique butterfly, okay? Like, we all really are. We all have different pasts. We all have different struggles. We all have different ways of looking at life. The thing that makes us unique is also the thing that can make us say, I don't want to be me. I want to be that person. I want to be the person who sings here. I want to be the person who leads that ministry. I want to do this thing. I want to do that. I want to be this. God will sometimes call you into those roles, but what God fully expects you to do is to be who you are right now. Be the best you. You don't see in this battle people going, man, I could totally be a better Joshua than Joshua. You don't see people saying, I should be a priest instead of the armed men. And you don't see the armed men saying, I'd rather be the person that gets to blow the trumpet because that would be cool. Like, it's not. They're saying, okay, whatever it is you need me to do, I will fulfill my function. I'm going to fulfill my role. I think about this a lot. Like, I was thinking about it during communion, to be honest with you. I'm a little ADD. It makes me a little paranoid when I have this on and we're singing, because I don't sing that well, and I would prefer that what I sound like does not come through the audio of the speakers, because these guys sound like harmony, right? You've got a set of 5 or 6 people who are all singing different notes that sound really pretty, and then when you inject me into that, it no longer sounds good, and I disrupt everything else that these people are doing, because I'm just now all of a sudden coming through the PA system. In that case, I wasn't intending to. But a lot of times in our cell groups, in our guys and our girls, whatever that, the people that we've got, that God has put in our life, what we do is we start injecting ourselves and we start saying, well, I'm going to be this and I'm going to do this. And we're disrupting the harmony of what God is trying to build in our lives. The victory gets won together when we all fulfill our role that has been given to us, okay? Also, I keep asking the worship team to call me up on stage for, singing, This is my plug, whomever is here listening. I can sing really good. Ignore what I just said. The next thing, I think this is also, when I thought about this, I just saw it in the notes. Our theme verse for the year, Ephesians 2, comes out of Ephesians 2. It says, God is building a unique home. He's using us all, irrespective of how we got here, in what he is building. He used the apostles and the prophets for the foundation. Now he's using you, fitting you brick by brick, stone by stone, with Christ Jesus as a cornerstone that holds all the parts together. I studied the Bible with a guy a few years ago, and we sat down and we were talking about the people that he could reach, the people that he could bring to Christ. And he said, man, I don't know anybody. Like, no one would listen to me. I don't have anybody that I could reach. Fast forward a couple years later, or a year later or so, and that man passed away. His funeral was filled with hundreds of people, and it was a reminder to me that we all have people in our lives that we can impact greatly. It may not feel like it. It may not seem like it. But that man filled a funeral home full of hundreds of people. We can reach out to people and we can share Christ with people because God has put us in the places we are. We just need to fulfill that role, all right, on a daily basis. And then the next one is I function in harmony, and I screwed that one up. I went to the harmony thing before that, but I function in harmony. That's the next one. Just, pretend I didn't say that harmony thing before. But our role in that case is not about us. If you got a bass singer, like trying to pretend to be a soprano, it's not going to sound good, right? If you have people who are arguing over what their roles are going to be, it doesn't sound good. We need to work in harmony together. Because at the end of the day, it's not about any one of those individuals like getting to be the on the spotlight. It's about what the people who get to hear get to experience, not what it means for them. And that's what our ministries are like. That's what our cells are like. It's not about for an individual person's glory. It's about being able to experience this victory together, okay? And then I think this Judges 5:2, I think God knows that good things happen when people stand together and they're united together. It says the leaders of Israel stood up and the people offered themselves willingly. Praise the Eternal One. We have big plans for what we're doing this year at the crossings between church plants and just cell growth and individual growth. And the things that we're trying to accomplish, they can seem big. We all in our life have these battles that seem like they're insurmountable, whether it's sin or our marriages or our children, whatever it may be. The victory can be won when we win it together. And then the fourth thing is that when we're together with God, we're together with, when we're together with God and we're together with the leaders and we're together with the people that God put in our life, we need to be together with God's purpose for my life. When I was reading this story, the number one thing that jumped out to me in Joshua chapter 5, verse 13, it says, Joshua asked, are you for us or for our enemies? He's saying, are you for Israel or are you for Jericho? And this, angel of the Lord, this commander of the Lord's armies, says, neither. That's concerning, right? Like, I read that the first time, and it was one of those things where it was like, well, what does that mean? Like, isn't this God's purpose? What he's trying to communicate to them is that our aim should not be that God blesses what we do, but rather that we would do what God blesses. That our goal shouldn't be that we get God to just do what we want him to do, but rather that we start adjusting the way that we look at things, because remember, getting together with God remembers that he's bigger than us, that he's stronger than us, that we should be in submission to him. And because of that, we start doing what God wants us to do, which means that God has purposes for our life that oftentimes match up with what we want, right? I believe God wants us to have a good marriage. But if we go to God just asking him for a good marriage because it's what we want and we're going to selfishly hold on to that, I don't know how God wants to bless that, right? But if we go to God and we say, hey, I want this life, I want this marriage to be good so that we can use it to bless others, so that we can bless our children, so that we can grow together as individuals, then I think that's something that is on board with God's purpose. Same thing with kids, same thing with leading in some facet, right? If we go to God and we say, God, I really want to lead this ministry. If it's because we want the glory, well, I don't think God's going to bless that. It's about saying, I want God's purpose to be lived out in my life. And guys, that's a hard thing, okay? Going back to what this plan was, these guys had to not just say, okay, all right, we're gonna do your plan, Joshua. We're just gonna follow and we're gonna do this. They actually had to put their boots on, get all geared up for war, and then go walk around this city 6 plus 7 times, right? They had to do that a whole lot. And then the victory was won after they obeyed what God wanted them to do. But that neither has always been kind of concerning, because it's an obvious reminder that, hey, God's not just, he's not just this, you always hear like God is for you. And I believe God is for us. He gave us Jesus as a sacrifice. But I don't think we should ever confuse God being for us with God as just someone that's always just gonna like provide us even if we don't care about him, even if we don't care about his purposes. God blesses us when we are willing to follow and submit to him. And I think that what happens a lot of times is that we fight for things that don't matter. We fight for our pride. We fight for we're defending ourselves in our relationships, or we are fighting for what people think of us. Because I spent a lot of my life so worried about what people thought about me. This is like growing up. I was so insecure that it was crazy. I'd tell you stories and you would think, that's something that crazy people would think. I never would even let my guard down if I was by myself, because I didn't know if there were cameras watching me, right? Crazy stuff, right? Paranoia, because I was so wrapped up in how people would view me. Now that's extreme, but guys, you guys know the kind of things that I'm talking about, right? That that we can get so wrapped up in how people view us that who we are matters so much that we will pretend to be something that we're not. I think the other things that we fight for is selfishness, is for laziness. That's crazy. We go out of our way to make sure that we can be lazy. That's like extra work so that we can be lazy. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But that whatever those things are, we're fighting for things that just don't matter. And God's saying, no, if you would just listen to me and you would fight for the things that have eternal importance, I'm going to be able to use you. I'm going to be able to give you a hope and a future. One of the things that changed from my life was not that I just immediately just clicked with God just fixed my insecurity, which clearly I already told you I'm terrified to be up here. So that's, not fixed. But it didn't just go away because God was like, oh, well, here, I'll just zap this to you. It was because he took the focus. He said, Chris, you should be worried about helping other people. And when you start taking the focus off yourself and you start putting it on other people, that's got a way of changing the way you perceive things. It's got a way of changing the way that you look at stuff. And so it's important for us to always remember that my life has to be in line with what God's purpose is. And that's where the joy of, if you're sitting here today and you're like, man, I don't know what God's purpose is. That's where our small groups get to help. That's where our relationships that we have with one another get to be able to say, hey, well, invite somebody to church. Let's get a Bible study going. Let's see, you've been talking about this friend. Let's get that person to come to church and see if they want a relationship with God. Okay. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about then too is a word of warning, right? That's the next one. It was always kind of like, well, do I want to end with like a scary thing, But I think it makes sense because what happens here is as the victory occurred in Jericho, as you know, or maybe you don't, like me, if I was sitting here 15 years ago, I didn't know anything about the Bible, so, if some preacher just started talking about Jericho, I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But what happened was after they marched, the walls miraculously crumbled down, and Israel was able to win the victory incredibly easy. One of the things that God told them to do was, hey, when you go into this town, when you go in there, you don't take anything. You don't take any dedicated items to other gods. I don't care if it's like, cool looking. I don't care if it's expensive. You take nothing. And for the most part, Israel did that. But there is a little tag at the very end of that where it says that this man named Achan did take something. And what happened was the very next battle, Israel goes to fight, and they just get whooped, right? They went up against this 17-foot tall giant guy, Shrek guy, and they won. Then they go to fight a little Chris Mullen, and they lose. And 38 people die as a result of that battle. And God traces it back to, look, when I told you to go into Jericho, and I told you not to take anything, somebody took something. Sin is a big deal. But the point here is that faking togetherness isn't going to fool God or bless me. And I think that's what's important, because this isn't about faking it. This starts with that getting together with God. That's not about what you do publicly. That's about who you are. That's about decisions that you make on the inside when you're alone. That's about you and your relationship with God. Everything else starts happening publicly outside. But faking this isn't going to work. In Galatians 6, 7, and 8, it says, don't be misled. No one makes fool of God. What a person plants, he will harvest. The person who plants selfishness ignores the needs of others, ignoring God. Harvest a crop of weeds, and all he'll have to show for his life is weeds. But the one who plants in response to God, letting God's Spirit do the growth work in him, harvest a crop of real life, eternal life. Guys, for a long time in my life, I can easily say that for me, it was faking. I was doing everything I could because I wanted God to bless me, but I wasn't connected to God the way I needed to be. I wasn't revering him. I wasn't submitting to him. I had problems of sin that I never told anybody. And I never thought I could even overcome them. That's why I didn't talk about it, because I was tired of saying, oh, well, I struggle with this. And then the next week, oh, I struggle with this. And then the next week, oh, I struggle with this. It just felt like I was on a cycle all the time. God longs to bless us. God longs to give us a hope and a future. God longs to give us a purpose and to be able to help us win those battles. But what we do a lot of times is we try to manipulate God into blessing us. Try to manipulate God into being able to give us a victory. And this verse to me, and the story of Achan and Jericho doing what he knew God told him not to do, is the warning that God's not going to be mocked here. If we want the blessings of God, we have to submit to him. And we got to do what he says. And that's everyday life. That's not easy. One of the things that were, that as I looked at this whole thing, anything that would disrupt every single point in this entire sermon is our pridefulness and our selfishness. And if we can deal with our pridefulness and our selfishness, guys, I genuinely believe that God has huge plans for what he wants to do in the crossings this year. We have church plant going out later this year. We have, church plants in the future, at some point. We have cell groups that are just got diced up, but I know that God is not okay with just us 3 or 4 people, getting baptized, right? He wants to have some huge things happen, but it's up to us as individuals to get it together with God, to get it together with our leaders, get it together with the people around us, and get on board with God's purpose in order for us to be able to experience victory. And what I can say is when we do that, he'll help us. When I gave it to God, I was able to overcome all sorts of things that if you ever take my class, I can tell you all about, but I won't tell you from up here. But that's one of those things, guys. And maybe you're here today and you don't really know what it is we're talking about. In your bulletin, we have an opportunity for us to be able to get more information. There's a cardstock piece of paper in your bulletin that says Crossings Church on one side, where problems of life meet the power of God. On the other side, there's a regular old form. And it's our prayer that today that you'll consider filling that out and be able to start a process where God is able to speak to you about your life, about what it really looks like, more in depth, how to have a relationship with God, and what that purpose for your life really looks like. And so that's our prayer. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray, and then we'll have the worship team up, and we'll go from there. Father, I just want to come before you and just thank you so much for today. God, I thank you for the love you have for us, God, for the wisdom that's in your word, God, for all the things you do for us, God. It's insane that, God, you are as big and mighty and strong as you are, and that, God, you love us even though we don't deserve it, even though we're constantly turning our back on you, even though we're just lowly people. God, the Bible says that you loved us first, and that's where our source of love for you should come from. And so, God, it's my prayer for every single person in here, God, to pull out that worship bulletin and to mark what it is that's going on in their life. There are Manasseh ministries starting up this week. God, there's people that have addictions. There are battles of sin that are waging in their life, that it can feel like there's just no light at the end of that tunnel. And God, I know that you've shown me that light. Not to use cliche language, but God, I'm so thankful for that. But God, I know that it comes through hard work and also comes through getting together with you and God, with other people. And I know that victory is possible because I've seen it in my life. And God, there's all sorts of things that people can check. God, I just pray that you'll help them to be open and honest about where they're at. And that, God, that ultimately we'll all be able to experience the good things you have for us. God, I pray this in your son's name. Amen.